once we have set out on adopting Hoshin Kanri through understanding those 4 Cs and the value and the benefits that come from the Hoshin methodology, why is it then that an organization finds itself struggling to balance day-to-day firefighting and operational work and the strategic initiatives that they have to put into place and execute in order to be able to deliver on that Hoshin strategy?
Yeah. And I think when I mean, we talked about these questions beforehand, and I think that's a really good question, and it's not an easy one. So what we need to do is to find a way to like we said, balance that, and like you said, and I recognize that from the leaders I meet, that we are more often in firefighting mode, and we not saying that strategy is not important, but on the day-to-day basis, it's easier to sometimes focus the immediate needs we have, right? And there are a few things that we can do, of course, and I think what we are focusing with Hoshin is also kind of what we see here from our book, is that instead of focusing too much on just finding the plans and the targets for what we need to do in the strategy work, we need, as a management, also think about how do we develop that process and method to do that. Because if we be more focused on the things we see right now in terms of challenges, we are not building our capability to solve new problems in the future as good as we can do, right? So we need, as a management team, not only focusing the targets and the here and now problems, we need to think about how do we build system and capabilities with leaders that can prepare us for the future, right? But if I reflect on some of the things that makes this difficult to balance, right? I think the first point is strategy is quite complex. It takes in many things in consideration, right? The results are not always immediate. It's more long-term planning, while operation is much more tangible. So if we see a fire, we can immediately try to do that and perhaps see the result already the next day when we have put out the fire. I also see many leaders growing to become executives and senior managers that also like to be in the operation. I mean, that's kind of where the pulse is, that's where the tempo is, right? So it's not only that strategy might be more complex and to some extent less tangible, but I think also a lot of leaders like to be kind of out in the business solving problems, right? So that's one thing that I believe is a reason why we sometimes finding it difficult to balance that. Another thing is based on what we have seen both in the research we did, but also with my own experience, is that many times we are missing the sense of urgency when we do strategy work. So we do the planning, we might gather a lot of energy for those strategy days where we are off site for 2 days and people feel kind of, oh, this is good, right? But then we go home, we start to communicate, we start to execute, and quite often that sense of urgency, if it was in the beginning, it quite often fades away. And many times you might not even have the sense of urgency to start with. And if you don't have that sense of urgency, I mean, it's quite easy to down prioritize that if that fire pops up or if something more exciting pops up, right? So if we don't have the sense of urgency, that will definitely be favorable to continue to do firefighting, because that will always feel much more important, right? And I'm always reflecting the last 2 years here on the sense of urgency we had during COVID. I mean, all of a sudden, the whole world decided that these are the top priorities to keep. Of course, that was more with a feeling of life and death, right? The stakes were high. But the sense of urgency was there, and then all of a sudden we could take decisions, we could make progress that I didn't thought was possible before that. And I'm not saying that the example is easy to replicate, but that's for me the sense of urgency. Imagine we would have the same drive for the few critical priorities in a company, to say these are the top 3 battles we must win, together with daily operation, and focus on that to create that. Then I think it would be easier to balance kind of daily operation firefighting with the strategic work. And if I just look at the strategy, I often see also there is an imbalance between planning and execution. Most organizations, especially if we talk about a bit larger organization, they have quite often a well-defined, outspoken planning process. That it's an annual wheel with a number of interactions and communication, and it might be also workshops, etc. Right? So we tend to focus quite a lot on the planning, but then we come to execution, and that's where we many times we just hope for the best almost. So all that thing we put into planning in the execution becomes more of let's see what happens. We have the plan, and that should be enough, right? So I see too many organizations that spend not enough time on the execution part, and then often we feel that we don't reach the objectives, and there might not be a big consequence if we don't reach the objective in the strategic work, because we might have not the right ones, and so on. So that in itself also creates and links to that sense of urgency, that it's strategy work is something that is a bit more slow. It happens when it happens. Let's see, it's for top management only, or for a few selected leaders, right? And then we have the daily operation, the firefighting, and that's where we focus. So I think these 3 points are part of explaining why we are struggling with that, finding that balance. And the better we would be to create a sense of urgency and follow through with our planning, I think the easier it would be to say firefighting is important, but it's also important with the strategic things. So, but it's a complex question, and I think it's a really good one to reflect on, kind of. So why do we have these struggles in our organization? Because these are more general, I think, observations and learnings I have made over the years.